Hello, welcome everybody to Mindsex Mastery. I am excited to be talking to Michael Neeley, who's here with us to share some of his insights and experience. He's got such a rich background. I can't wait to get into it. Now, first of all, tell us how you went from acting to personal development. I love that.
Yeah, gosh, during my years as an actor, that being my first profession, I really studied character development. And when you do that, you learn about the human psyche. And so outside of doing regular role, getting into character for a role, I really did a lot of work with groups like Tony Robbins' work and other people studying ontology, the way we are as humans being. And as that developed over the years, then when I decided ultimately to get out of acting, I took all the training that I had about, human psyche and started to put it into a book and into a coaching program. And so that's kind of how that evolution took place.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that's such a great transition too, to recognize that there is such a link between the two. I can't imagine, I've never really acted myself, but I can just imagine what it's like to really study and get into a character and be able to embody that for yourself. That's great.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And actually, to quote even Shakespeare, all the world's a stage. And the truth is that we are acting to a certain degree all the time. We even have certain personas that we put on in different settings for different people. Like, when you're getting pulled over by a police officer, you have that persona that you put on there versus the one that you have with your parents and the one that you have versus when you're first meeting somebody new, and so many different personas we have that we take on.
Yeah, no kidding. So does your work now involve people figuring out what the persona is, or tell me about your work now?
Yeah, so my work is pretty much, the root of it is about getting rid of some underlying stories. So personas will develop out of belief systems frequently.
Yes.
And they're good. I'm not knocking personas. I mean, they're there to serve us. The challenge is when a particular persona starts to take control and it becomes, the one controlling the reins. Really, it's in the driver's seat, as opposed to your bigger self, your higher self, being the one saying, hey, wait a minute, do I really need to act this way in this given moment? And you have a choice in the matter. But what I talk about with getting to the root issues is that frequently we have an underlying belief system that we've built up over time. We've got evidence to support it, but it's false. It's a lie that we're backing up mentally, that really, if we let go of, our life could be so much better. So that's kind of the root work that I do, and personas just come into play a little bit as part of that.
Oh, I love that. That's so true. And in the work that I do with Mindsex Mastery, that's exactly what I look at too, is what are our stories, or the person's stories around sex, because we all have them. And, sometimes it comes from religion or school or parents, friends, your first experience. And it's not always good. It has us caught up in like these wheels of baloney about what we're really supposed to be feeling and thinking about sex. And it's such an intimate topic. So when you're working with people, how are you able to, because it can be really sensitive and intimate to look at like where these come from. And especially when you look at the beliefs are instilled in us, usually by our parents, and they're not always that great. That can be kind of sensitive to do. So how do you ease into that with your clients?
Really, I think the big thing is to help them to find it for themselves. It's almost like, imagine being an archaeologist. You have a suspicion about where there may be some ancient ruins buried beneath the surface. And so you start to kind of speculate. You start to remove a little bit of dirt. And the more you do, then you start to see, oh, hey, look what we found here. And so in guiding a client to explore that on their own would be, first of all, figuring out, well, what are the symptoms? What's showing up in your life? Are you getting in a stream of bad relationships that continue over and over in a repeating pattern? Then you go, okay, well, there's the common denominator is you. So there's got to be some root cause in that. So what's your underlying belief system that allows you to keep generating that? And similarly, when it comes to sex, I mean, if they have some issues that are coming up around sex, what might be, causing that underneath as well? So.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really great point. Can I get you just to move a little bit back?
Sure.
Our name, how we have our little name at the top. It's covering up your eyes. There we go. Yeah. And we have to see your eyes. I don't know if everyone else will see that, but that's what I see. So just in case.
Yeah.
That's so great. When we talk about things as intimate as sex and we start getting into where our beliefs are, some people hold on to the stories like it's their lifeline. Have you ever come across that? Like, how do you overcome that with people?
Absolutely. Well, the most important thing that I find that is effective for it is that you don't try to tell them that the story is a lie. Right. What you do is you start to help them to separate the fact from the fiction, because the best stories are all rooted in some form of truth there.
Yeah.
And so I'll just use myself as an example. I went through a series of bad relationships where my partner cheated on me. And so, the first one that I recall was I was in like high school, a junior year. I was 17 years old, and my girlfriend, I'd taken her out to dinner. We were having a nice dinner for her birthday. And at 17, I saved up money to be able to even just do this.
Yeah.
And about, literally before we even got our main course, she was starting to complain like, oh, I'm not feeling really well. Maybe you should just take me home. So I'm like, okay, yeah, being the good boyfriend, took her home. But it's also a Friday night, and I'm in high school, so I went to the burger joint where typical high school students at my town hung out, and I meet up with some friends, and I swear I'm not there more than 15 or 20 minutes, and she walks in with another guy.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah. So you see, and that was just the first instance of it.
Yeah.
And then it happened again a few years later with another girlfriend, and then with my first wife. And so when you get into a string of these, you start to build a story. So those are the facts, as laid out. The story I made up was that women cheat.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Right. It's just those women cheated.
Yeah.
And what I even looked at then deeper was, well, as I mentioned before, what's the common denominator? And that's me. Yeah. And so as I started to look at, what am I doing to attract this pattern? What am I doing to keep this in place?
Yeah.
And I realized it was my belief system. And so once I figured that out and then was able to get rid of that belief, then I haven't been in a bad relationship since then. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's such a great story. And it's so true. Especially when it's something that involves the heart. It's not just like I lost my job, although that can be as impactful for people.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about, affairs of the heart or sex, and there's such differences between men and women anyhow, but then we make it even more complicated by these stories and beliefs that we add on to it. And, one of the things that I talk to with people is we really don't prepare anybody for sex, great sex or otherwise, right? It's, I did a series of interviews and most people were like, well, we learned about it in school, or my parents gave me a book, or there was the birds and the bees conversation. But nowhere do they talk about that your emotions can be involved. It can be a really, great experience. You can have a lot of things that go with it. So, or you can just enjoy it to enjoy it. It doesn't have to involve anything else, which is, especially women are not told that. So, to guiltily want to have that experience, it's really just counter to what many of the women out there have been taught, and they feel so much guilt about it.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, if a man really wants to enjoy a woman and, with no strings attached, we haven't really set that up for them either. Mm-hmm. So we have a long ways to go. So how do you find when you were able to come out of that situation with the string of bad relationships, were you able then right away to have a great relationship, or were you still seeing some aftermath of it?
No, actually, once I let go of that story, I haven't been cheated on since.
Right. Okay.
And so that was the thing. Now, it's not that I didn't get in relationships that may not have been great for some other reason.
Yeah.
But at least I stopped attracting and creating that in my relationships. And so, yeah, that was like, it was bam, done deal, no more.
Yeah, that's so great. That's wonderful. Yeah. And, I also, I was so interested in your bio when you were talking about it. You help people do speaking. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about that, because I can just imagine the fears that come up and the stories that we build up in our head when we're going to go do that as well.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny they say that, because I've read this statistic. I don't know how much truth there is in it, but I've heard it so much it probably is. But that's that people fear public speaking more than death, which is, that just kind of
Wow.
baffles me. Yeah. But yeah, people have a big fear around that. And I think, when you start to really work with that, some of the core issues of that are, feeling like you're going to be embarrassed, you're going to do something wrong. All of your feelings of self-worth get tied up into that moment in front of people. And so when I work with people to really start to let go of that's one piece of it. The other piece is then simultaneously build their confidence in the value of what it is that they have to say. Because when you can put those two things together, then it frees people up to really step forth and let their magic shine.
Yeah, I love that. That's so great. And it's a really great idea to do both at the same time, because if you take away one set of beliefs and you don't give them evidence to the contrary, then they're kind of left going back to the old beliefs, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you think, what I often do with my clients, or just people I talk with, I find there's so many parallels between the stories we have around sex and or our business or personal life. And people sometimes laugh when I say that. But for example, if you have someone that's really not comfortable speaking in front of a bunch of people, what I've found is that they're probably not very comfortable speaking their truth in the bedroom. So I find that there's those parallels. Have you ever found other kinds of parallels like that? If it's, holding you back in one area, it's probably holding back in another.
Yeah, I find that all the time. And I love the example that you gave, because it's prime that you are able to speak your desires and speak your truth in the bedroom. And just let me just say this for any women out there, okay? From a man's perspective, we're not mind readers.
Yes.
We're more like explorers. So in the bedroom, we're trying to figure out what pleases you.
Yeah.
And what we're basing this on, especially if you're not just telling us, we're basing this on trying to sense your reactions. And so if you're liking something, you can let us know verbally, or just let us know some other way that, yes, that's pleasing to you, because that's what we go for. Now, of course, the challenge is with a guy too. It's like, once we find something like that, we can latch on to it. It's like, oh, she likes that, I'm just going to say that. And we know that changes and shifts over time. So gentle coaxing and just saying, hey, try this maybe, or something. So communication in the bedroom, I think, is key. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
And I probably didn't answer your question, but.
No, you really did. No, that's great. And I think you bring up a really good point. Women tend not to say. We've been taught that we're not allowed to express what we really want. And I'm making big generalizations here, but that's really what, it's not okay for a woman to be bold enough to say what she wants in the bedroom. There's so many, labels that go along with that, whether that's true or not, obviously. And then for guys, there can be a lot of ego attached to it, because you guys are expected to be these Don Juans. How, if we never taught you how, I don't know, but that's the expectation of you all. So, if a woman does say something that she wants or doesn't like, it can really be taken the wrong way from the guy's perspective. So what do you say to men that, maybe hung up around that kind of story?
Yeah, so for a guy who, doesn't want to hear that, and I agree, you're spot on with that I think there's two pieces of it, though. Part of it is in the delivery as well. So there is something about, the way a woman can tell you what she wants without being like, hey, no, you're getting this all wrong. It's more of like, just give some gentle, nudge toward what you do want. Because here's the trick of it, and this is where the nature of this comes into play, is that you want to, for a guy, because there's a lot of ego involved in it, and he does want to be the Don Juan. If you can give him those signals in such a way that he can feel like he's getting it, he's figuring it out. It's like, this is my idea in the first place, but it was really you were planting the seed of that idea. I think you'll have much more success.
Oh my God, that's a great tip. I'm actually going to write that down and put it in my Facebook groups later. That's such a good point. And you can do that outside of the bedroom or inside. Make it his idea to take the garbage in. He'll do it.
Exactly. Totally.
I love that.
We're easy like that.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And, we make things so complicated, and a lot of that comes from our beliefs, but it's also, something you touched on earlier about our self-worth. Because as soon as we're triggered to think that our worth is being challenged, we put up all these defenses, we start the blame game, we, get really defensive, and that can be really tough. How do you help people navigate that?
Yeah, the blame game is huge. I think one of the biggest keys to that is for people to learn to take 100% responsibility. And what I mean by that is that you're not, and it's don't go over and don't go under, because either way, when you do that, it's going to be a mess. So take responsibility for your own needs and desires. Because quite honestly, and I'm sure your listeners are probably very well aware of this, you can't make anybody happy. I can't make my wife happy.
Yeah.
I can do stuff that I know will have certain impact on her, but the truth is, she has to be happy on her own. Yeah. And so similarly in the bedroom, it's like, take responsibility for what you want. And quite honestly, and again, I'm speaking in a generality as well, but I think most guys want to please you.
Yeah.
And so I personally find great excitement in that, in my wife's pleasure. And so I think that's a key element as well, to let go of this whole blame thing. Just own it. If she wants something and she doesn't ask for it, and this actually does come up sometimes where she won't ask for it exactly the way she wants it, and then it's like, look, that's not my responsibility then.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good point. And I think if you're that's the other part of the work I do, and this comes up for me equally with men and women, recognizing what you do want and what your actual desires are, and having I don't want to say courage, because it's not really about courage. It's the beliefs that are, that you can't have these ideas that are holding you back. But if you truly desire something and you haven't expressed it, that's on you. Your partner can't be expected to fulfill that. The other part of that is sometimes we don't even have a clue what we want because we haven't been able to explore. So that's something that I try to get people to do, self-exploration, but then also like admitting, it's okay if you want something different. You're not a bad person for that. Yeah. That's really tough sometimes.
Yeah, totally. And Delora, it's great that you mentioned that, because here's another thing when I think, at least in my experience with my wife, is that if she is not tuned into what she really wants, she'll often ask for something else. Yeah. And if I don't want to deliver that something else, she'll start to get upset. Yeah. And so as an example, she loves to walk to the beach. We live close to the ocean, and she loves to walk down to the beach. And I'm not that big of a fan of walking to the beach all the time. I mean, I like it, but sometimes I've been swamped with a lot of work lately. And so she'll start to complain and, nag at me that I'm not walking to the beach. And I ask her, I'm like, what is it that you want about the beach? She's like, well, really, I just want connection time with you. Yeah. I'm like, great. Can we do that without walking to the beach? Yeah. So that's just a little example of it. But when you really tune into what's the underlying thing that you want, let go of that other way that it looks, the packaging, if you will. I kind of refer to it like this is what it's wrapped up in, because maybe your partner will like it in a different wrapping. Yeah. And so go with that way.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think that, that's true for any relationship, even like you could even carry that forward to your professional relationship or in business.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. If you're hiring someone and you're not clear on what you want, you're not going to get it. If you are the coach of someone and you don't establish what you're looking for or what your expectations are, you're not going to get it. So that's a really good point, a good lesson for everyone to learn.
Yeah. And, it's also like in the workforce as well. It's like if you want results of a particular thing, if you've got an employee and you expect something done, let them figure out how they want to do it. Don't try to trap it in your particular way of having them do the work. I mean, unless it's important for the job, but let them do their own thing and you'll find much better results, I find. Yeah,
that is so true. And, that is probably one of the hardest things to do. So I just left a corporate job. I was there for 13 years. Wow. And everyone's like, oh my God, you're leaving that. I was in government actually. So in Canada where I live, it's really safe and you get benefits and whatever. And it was 6 figures. Like, why are you crazy? You're leaving all that. But I wasn't able to fit into the bureaucracy the way they needed me to. And so for me, it was really important that I honored what I was looking for and moved forward with it. But when you get caught up in the way it's always been, you're always going to get the same old. And that's kind of what I found with government. It was a great experience and I loved that I had that. But they weren't interested in changing anything. And when I say they, it's the big they, it's not just individuals. But that can be the same thing for us. You get into this habit of, this is the way things have been and need to be, but they don't really need to be that way. You can change it anytime you want, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because one of the things that I teach with my book that I've got coming out, hopefully later this year, we'll see. I've got so much on the plate, I may push it out, but it's called The Art of Forgetting. And one of the things about it is that when we get used to a status quo, we set certain expectations, and then we tend to pigeonhole ourselves to show up that way. Yeah. And so, for instance, you may show up a certain way around your family all the time because they expect you to show up that way.
Yeah.
And so in a relationship, I think it's important to try to break down those barriers so that you can show up naturally the way that you want to in that moment. What's occurring for you, instead of having stipulations. And again, relating this back to the bedroom, is we can become very habitual in the bedroom. And after a while, it can become harder to open up to other experiences. And I think too, and maybe more so for guys, you'll have to address the women in this piece, but we can be very goal-oriented, results-driven, like just, I'm going for the orgasm. We're going in. Yeah. And I think it's important to let go of that sometimes and just go in there and let's just be. Let's just see what it's like to sit here in, naked embrace, intimacy, and see where that goes. So.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's such a great way to describe it too. And, what typically happens is, there's so much at least in some of the people, the women I've talked to, is they have their story before they get to the bedroom. So it's not that their goal is to get the dishes done and their to-do list done. And, well, he didn't look at me today, so, I'm not, it's almost like a little bit of a vendetta, like, okay, fine. He didn't pay attention this week. Too bad. I'm not going to give him any, it's almost like treated that way a little bit. And the more, especially for the women that I've worked with so far, anyhow, the more we don't engage with our sexual energy and get in touch with what we desire, and that can be with or without the partner, the easier it is not to. And the further away we can get from it. I think with the guys, it's a little bit, and I'm generalizing, so you can tell me if you don't think this is correct, but I think with the guys, it's a little bit closer to the surface. So it's a little easier to access, and, not having it for a while is a little less natural, but maybe I'm making that up in my own head on my experience.
Well, yeah, it's hard for me to tell too in a generalization, because I think I'm different than most guys.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, thanks. I've done a lot of training on it. And plus, for me, one of the things that was a big shift as I got older was, in my youth, sex was more about the thrill of the orgasm and the excitement and all of that. And now it's more about just the intimacy. Yeah. And so I think there can be intimacy without sex. And so that's, there's definitely been a shift there.
No, well, that's a beautiful realization for yourself. And, we don't create the space for men to be able to admit that they do want that kind of intimacy. Some of them don't even know that can be possible, and it's not just a girl thing. So that's another thing that comes up. So I think that that's so beautiful that you've done that work and you're able to connect that way. I think and your wife is obviously a very lucky woman then, because she then gets to benefit from that work as well. That's so good. So when you're working with your clients, is there typical themes that come up? Like, everybody's different, of course, and we all have our own beliefs, but are there certain things that keep appearing and happening?
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, the bedroom stuff doesn't come up a whole lot with my particular clients. It's more about I would say one of the bigger themes is finance, which of course that can end up playing out in the bedroom as well. When you start to get nervous about other stuff, it all has an impact on your sexuality. Yeah. And so I think finance is one of the big ones. People being able to break through some barriers around that, some old belief systems that are holding them back. And it may not just be finance, it may be just abundance in general.
Yeah, that's so great. So how do you help them work through that? Because I think that is a really important piece, for me, even in or out of the bedroom. I just did a post the other day, actually, what does your sex life have to do with your business? And it turns out a whole lot.
Right.
And it was the idea of the parallel between your sex life and your business. So, but even if you don't talk to them about that part, but you're focusing on the abundance part, how is it that you're able to help them focus on a more abundant way of seeing their situation, even if it's dire straits?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest obstacles is always finding out where along their history they created this story, because it's all a story, quite frankly. And one of the things I try to teach people right away, you hear a lot of people say, it's just almost common tongue to say, I can't afford it.
Yeah.
And that's such a bad habit, because the truth is you can probably afford it. Yeah. I don't drive a Ferrari, not because I can't afford it, but because I prefer to live in a house. But if I wanted to, I could buy a Ferrari. I may have to live in it, but it's choices. We make choices in our lives. And so instead, I try to teach people right away to change their languaging. So instead of saying I can't afford it, say I don't have that in my budget at the moment. I've chosen to spend my money elsewhere. And so you take away the victim speak.
Yeah, that's good.
And you take back your power. And so that's just, the afford it piece is just one example of it, but then it can come into play in all of your languaging. So instead of saying, you made me mad when you did that, well, again, that's not true. A more true statement would be to say, I noticed when you did that, I felt anger. And then you can start to look at, for me, well, I wonder why that was. Why did I feel angry about that? And it becomes a bigger self-exploration, and you start to, similarly around the whole abundance thing, you start to get, oh, wait a minute, it's not that I can't make any more money, it's that maybe I feel guilty about it. Because and this one's specific for one of my clients who we discovered he had an underlying belief that it wasn't fair that he was making so much money while there were so many people starving in the world.
Yes.
And when you have a belief like that, it's going to be hard to make more money.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so key. And it's really, the clients I've worked with either through Mindset or Mindsex, they're so surprised how much this is tied to the way we were brought up. But, if we all accept, or we all know that, our subconscious is formed from the age of 0 to 7, and it's an empty slate until then.
That's right.
Although your parents did the best they could, they were doing the best they could with their own programming and their own beliefs that they were carrying forward. And, each generation is different. So you have to kind of get back to the source of that. And, he came by that belief honestly, but it was something that was really probably holding him back unnecessarily too. Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned those formative years, because as we started to dig into his story, he remembered all of a sudden, he's like, I remember when I was 6 years old and it was Christmas and we had a whole bunch of beautiful wrapped presents underneath the tree. And some carolers came knocking on the door. And so as we're standing there listening to the carolers sing, I noticed some other children who had walked out, and were peering in through our window, and they looked all poor and raggedly dressed, and they were pointing in and staring at the presents with their eyes all big. And he's like, and I remember having this thought that they're probably going to go home to no presents, or maybe just one. And so, and he just felt that wasn't fair. And so imagine seeding that story, when you're 6 years old, to already start to feel that way. And then how later you grow up and, it really can be something to hold you back.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's really, it's great that you help them realize that, because I've seen some coaches and some people who say, well, you just have to do these affirmations and you just have to forget that that's what this is not true. You really are abundant. Go ahead and look forward to what you're looking for. Spend the money. It's okay. It'll show up.
Right.
But when you have this underlying belief, it's not going to show up, because that's actually what your brain is talking about.
Exactly.
That is the signal that it's putting out there.
Yeah. And so again, like we talked about earlier, that, I'm not going to tell him that that's not true or to erase it, but about what we then would look at is, well, what are the facts? Okay. So the fact was he was standing there. They had presents under the tree. The fact was there were some carolers. The fact was that he saw kids looking in the window. the rest of the story, he made up that they were going to go
Yeah.
home and not have presents under the tree, which could
Yeah.
be totally different. They could have been staring at those presents and go, hey, that one looks just like one that we have at home. You just don't know. And if his thought was that they were dressed poorly, I mean, who knows? They could have been just coming from doing the play A Christmas Carol and we're in costume. There's so many other things that could be what's going on, as opposed to the story that he made everything mean, by adding that onto the facts. So
yeah, that's so great. And the other thing is that maybe they were poor, but that is another thing to look at. It doesn't mean he also has to live as if he's poor, right? Because you really can't give and be abundant if you're not also yourself abundant. So it kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah.
I love that you said that, give abundantly too, because that's the other piece of it that then I moved into coaching him with, is that, look, you can make a difference for children like that. Make more money, you can give more. The more abundance you have, the more you can share with the world, and the more of your own magic and compassion that you can put out there. So it really, but you got to find where those stories came from and really reshape them.
Yeah, that's so great. I think that's a really great point to make for people as well. And, it's almost as if money and sex are treated like these dirty little secrets, right? We don't talk about money in any positive or any real way. We certainly don't talk about sex in a positive way. There's all these little little secrets about it. For me, I was told I was never good with money. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up believing that I just wasn't good with money, and money's going to come in and money's going to go. And I deferred my power to other people. And then I had a job where I was responsible for balancing a budget of $14 million. So when I started to look, and I'd come in like within dollars, right? So then when I started to look at that, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Hello, I manage $14 million. I'm good with money. There's no question about it, but it's true, because I just automatically carried that story forward. That's something, even today, if you ask my mother, she would say I'm not good with money. So, that's her story about what she saw.
Exactly.
But, it was challenging her belief that you had to save everything and whatever. So I think that that's so important. And the same thing around sex. We can be told, it's not okay for you to have sex until you're married, or you're not, you can't enjoy sex unless it's with your husband, or, as a woman, that's what you would typically hear. And it's like, no, that's not true at all. Yes, you may want to do that, but you may not want to do that. It's okay either way.
Yeah. It's I hearken back to the quote as you're talking about this, which I'm sure you've heard from Henry Ford, that whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Well, my version of that, which I've done my own twist on it, which is whether someone else thinks you can or thinks you can't, they're right if you believe them. And so this again is another important piece. So when your mom or whoever else it was who may have said that you're no good with money, if you really believe that, then that has so much power. And it can really have an impact on your results. And so I teach people as well, don't believe the other crap that people put out there. That's their story. You are, in charge of your own life. You're creating your own. So don't give them the power. Take that power back for yourself.
Yeah, that's a really great message to be putting out there with your clients and with anyone else that hears your message from this interview, because I think we so readily give our power away. And sometimes we do just because we don't know that we can have our own power. We don't know that we've given it away to begin with. But it's also sometimes it's easier. Like, sometimes self-development can be kind of tough, right? So taking the easy road and not changing anything and just going along your easy way. Okay, go ahead. But you're not really happy.
No, I know. It's I'm reminded of the scene from The Matrix. You probably remember that movie. The one guy who, he's been one of the ones who's unplugged and realizing the reality of the world. But then he's telling, the Keanu Reeves character, he's like, yeah, I don't care if that steak's not real. It tastes real. And so that's true. Sometimes it's easier for us to just go to sleep and believe this other stuff that's not true and not real.
Yeah.
It's comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Comfortable and easy. That doesn't mean you're happy, though. It doesn't mean that you're going to get to a better place or get your results.
Yeah.
That's so good. And again, you're not going to have your needs met because you haven't been able to express them or do the work that goes along with them.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also something I know, like for many of the women that I've talked to, a big thing is being able to receive. So we're, brought up to be givers. It's not that men aren't givers either. They totally are, but we're brought up to be givers. And then when it's time for us to receive, so I may express the need, but then I'm not going to, like, when it starts happening, it's uncomfortable for me to receive without automatically giving something back. So I may not be receptive to it. So that's the other part of the equation. Do you ever have that experience as well?
Yeah, well, I don't have that in my experience with my relationship currently, but I do have experience with that with clients who really find it hard to receive. And there's so many layers to that one alone. And, quite honestly, I fault the church for a lot of stuff around sexuality, whichever church it may be. I don't know all the different doctrines, but, sex is something to be enjoyed. Yes, it's also for procreation, but it wouldn't have been so dang enjoyable if it wasn't meant to just to have fun with it. And so I think it's really important for women, and this, by the way, too, I've experienced this with some men as well, that they feel like, they have to be in that position of being able to please their partner. And if they can't, then they feel a little bit of lack of their own worth as well. And so the difference too, though, and this is where I think a big challenge comes in, is we're pleased differently.
Yes.
I can only speak to the female side from my experience with women, but I've been with partners who have said that, I don't need the orgasm. I'm happy with just the other elements, the feeling, the intimacy, and everything else. And for a guy, we tend to be, again, results driven. We want the orgasm. And so it's a matter, too, of then just realizing, oh, well, their needs aren't the same as mine. And so don't impose those on each other, and just really start to accept that, I'm going to get my stuff taken care of. And in that process, they'll be responsible for taking care of their own needs too. And then I think it's a win-win. Yeah,
that's a really great point. And I think, so true. Like I said, we do not set men or women up for great sexual experiences from the get-go. And you're so right. In all religions, if you take out the actual church part of it, sex is talked about in a very healthy and positive way. And it's not just about procreation. However, those who have interpreted it and taught it to us have their own beliefs, have their own judgment, and that's what's passed on. So, if you're able to separate that, it's, becomes less about religion and more about the people who interpreted that religion for us.
Yes.
And we're at such a sensitive age when we're introduced to the church.
Yeah.
I can remember being a little kid and, they were talking about what is a sin, and my church wasn't that aggressive about it, but I remember thinking, well, that's not really that bad. I don't think that's a sin, and I remember having this debate with my mom. I'm like, well, I don't agree. I'm not considering that a sin. If I decide to do it, I'm going to do it. Like something like, I don't even know what it was, maybe lie or something. I'm like, well, it's not good to lie, but I don't think it's a sin. God's not going to get that mad, is he? Like I can just remember having that debate. And I was like, I don't think that's exactly right. I think we might have interpreted something there.
Right.
I think that's so good. Well, I have loved talking to you. I think that you have such a refreshing point of view, and I'm so glad you're doing the work you do because it's so needed out there.
Oh, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about this book that you have coming up.
Well, it's called The Art of Forgetting, and I actually developed it. I mentioned after my acting career, I kind of wafted through a couple of other things while this was developing, and I happened to be working in the pharmaceutical industry. And a really interesting thing occurred while I was working there is I was introduced to what's called a double-blind study. And in a double-blind study, obviously the patient doesn't get to know whether they're getting a placebo or the drug, but the double-blind means that the physician doesn't get to know whether he's giving you the drug or the placebo. And I thought, why the heck would that matter? They're not taking the medication. But they've proven time and again that if the physician knows, it has an impact on your outcome as the patient, a statistically significant, measurable outcome. And so I thought, wow, wonder why that is. And so then as I realized, it's because of their expectations. So if I'm giving you something and I expect you to get better, you're going to subconsciously pick up on that and you're going to get better.
Yeah.
And so similarly, as I started, again, applying this back to just human nature, I thought, well, you know what? It's the same thing in relationships. If I expect you to show up in my world a certain way, there is an increased chance of you showing up that way. Now, maybe it's only a small increase, 1 or 2% more, but my expectations are having an impact on your response.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I started, applying that to relationships. And so that's part of how the book started to develop is how do we show up in the world where our expectations build the way people show up around us. And then not only that, our expectations of ourselves as well. So even just by planting the seed of you saying, I'm a night owl. I can never get up before 10 a.m. Saying that and having that expectation of yourself, you're actually cementing that in place. And that truly, if you want to change, you got to start to shift that piece, which is also a little bit of a system. And so ultimately the goal of this is that when you let go of all of these thoughts that you have around an expectation of how someone's going to be, the idea would be you could wake up next to your partner, look them in the eye and say, do I know you? And really mean it and get to know them new every day so they can just show up how they're going to show up.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah. So when do you think it's going to be published or released?
Well, I was hoping for November, so we'll see. I've got so much other stuff going on. I keep kind of putting it on a back burner, but I have been in talks with a couple of publishers, but then also a couple of editors to help me get the finishing touches on it. It's mostly done, and I'm also looking at creating it as a workbook format because I like the idea that I don't want it to be just a bunch of talking heads, someone just giving you this information. I want there to be, here's what you can do to make this happen in your life, in your world. Yeah. And so have it go through modules where people can actually practice this stuff.
Oh, that's so great. So you could almost get a book and then exercise accompaniment to go with it.
Yeah.
That's such a great idea because it's so true. Sometimes, I don't know, read a book a week. And sometimes I have to go back through the book and remind myself there was an exercise I was supposed to do there. So having a workbook to accompany it would probably have all that.
Yeah, and the thing is so much of what it's based on are the habits that we've created. So if you want to change those habits, it's really good to put some practices in place. And the only way to do that is to do things over time. So if you're in a workbook format, I can help people through this process. And I'll just share with your listeners one of the things that I do just as a little piece for people to realize how much of life we go through on autopilot is the next time you brush your teeth, and I like this one because hopefully you're doing it 3 times a day, is switch hands. Brush your teeth with the opposite hand. And one of the first things you'll notice is that you have to pay attention again. Like I remember every time I ever do this, I'm accidentally hitting my gums too hard or poking my jaw. And what it is there to remind you is that so much of what you do, you just do on automatic pilot without even thinking about it. And when you shift, you start to bring your focus and your attention back to things. And so, that's just a little simple exercise, brushing the teeth. But now imagine doing that in your relationship, bringing your attention back instead of just, hi, honey, I'm home, quick peck on the cheek or whatever, to really look them in the eye and make that shift and bring presence and awareness back to things.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think that's a really great exercise for people to do and carry it forward to other areas. In fact, I'm going to go brush my teeth later and I'm going to do just that.
Try
that's
it
so
out.
great. Yeah, for sure. How can people get in touch with you?
MichaelNeeley.com is the kind of like the catch-all, and that's Neeley is the way you spell my last name. So MichaelNeeley.com. And right now I've got a summit about ready to start called the Conscious Life Summit, which goes live on June 3rd. And so I also have that website as well, consciouslifesummit.com. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah, and what's really cool about that summit too, because there will be some stuff on sexuality, but it's also, there are so many aspects, as you know, Delora, about living consciously. You can be conscious relationships, there's conscious sex, there's conscious parenting, there's conscious capitalism and business. So I created this summit with the idea that it's easy for us to really focus and get really good at one area, but it'd be really nice to broaden our horizon across all aspects of living. And so I'm bringing in 24 guest experts from 12 different conscious lifestyle categories.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so you'll get a taste of every bit of like what it's like to be a conscious marketer, for goodness sake, to promote your business or your stuff. How do you do that consciously? And so it's going to be a really cool summit, and it's free, and it runs from June 3rd to June 10th. And again, it's at consciouslifesummit.com.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Well, I'm going to share this in my Facebook groups and the other ones that are not my own, but that I participate in and with my mailing list.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I hope you get
Thanks.
kind of, And, this has been fascinating. I always love having someone else's perspective on things, and how, beautiful and open you were to this. This was so great. So I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been a really fun talk.
Oh, good. I'm glad you thought so. So we will be in touch soon. This is Mindsex Mastery with Michael Neeley. I hope you go to his site, michaelneeley.com, or consciouslifesummit.com. He's got some really fun things coming up. And I can't wait to read your book. So it's going to be on my list.
Cool. I will let you know as soon as it's ready.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Dolores.
Thank you.
Take care.